Welcome, everyone, to the Indie Reds podcast. I'm your host, Joe Dilling. With me tonight, Boback Latfalian and James Dimitri Esquire. As Thanksgiving is approaching here in the United States, any beer recommendations for Thanksgiving dinner? I'm sure that Jim will have one, so I'm going to go to Boback first.
I was going to defer to Jim because Jim's my go-to in,
Pretty much,
any type of new beers. He posts a lot of brewery beers and things like that. It makes a lot of trips to breweries, so I'll defer to him personally because I'm sure I'll probably have whatever my dad buys from Aldi on Thanksgiving. So I don't know.
Nice. So nice. What does your dad buy from Aldi?
He'll probably find some value pack, probably some off-brand Aldi brand beers that will do the trick because they're free. So.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, they usually, because they're a German company, they usually sell some German beers there. I think I've seen Warsteiner there before, which wouldn't be a bad choice for Thanksgiving. So, but let's see here. Well, I think this is going to be. I'll give you like a beer nerd selection and sort of everyday selection. So. I'll start with the everyday selection first. I would like, just honestly with turkey, you're not gonna go wrong with pretty much any standard, mass-produced American lager. So I tend to prefer Miller High Life, so I would go with that. Although if you're going to go with Budweiser or Rolling Rock or whatever tickles your fancy, you'll be in good shape.
Shout out to Michael Need with the sorry, Jim, to interrupt, but shout out to Michael Need with the High Life.
Yeah.
You also missed Pabst, by the way. Another shout out to Michael Need.
Pabst, old style, whatever. The beer nerd selection would be like a Saison. So if you're going to go for the granddaddy of Saisons, you do Saison DuPont. If you're going to do American versions, like from Indianapolis, I would say you won't go wrong with like Central State's Table Beer, which is essentially a Saison-style beer, or Taxman's La Maison Saison. So brown ales work too. So Bell's Best Brown's really good. Sometimes Broad Ripple Brew Pub does brown ale. And so, yeah, those are my recommendations. I don't want to make this into the Jim Dimitri Beer Nerd podcast, so I'll stop there.
I'm probably going to be having Sun King Oktoberfest because my father-in-law was down here, and when he was last, they still had a few kegs left. So I'm pretty sure we'll be drinking Oktoberfest.
Nice crisp malty. That'll work.
All right. So moving on from beer, the rundown tonight, guys, we're going to, the Reds visit Selhurst Park. We'll chat about that. We'll also look at some changes that have happened in the EPL since we last podcasted. I know it's only been a week since we talked to John Green. Then we're going to look ahead at the Napoli match as well as look ahead at Brighton. But first, a bit of self-promotion. If you haven't checked out our John Green podcast special, please do. Whether you know who he is or not, all you need to know going into this interview is that he's a Red. Also, if you know anyone who's a fan of his books, films, vlog, or podcast, seriously recommend it to them that they check it out. So maybe your sister-in-law. Sorry, I have a joke here, so I'll just put it in. Maybe your second ex sister-in-law. Is sitting across the table from you, and she's talking about these books or John Green's blog. Maybe say, hey, you know what? Some guys, I listen to their soccer podcast, and they talk to John Green. He's on a social media hiatus, so why don't you check this out? Hey, good plugs around the Thanksgiving table for those Americans of us. So
you might want to mention that there's a vasectomy story.
Yeah. So just one quick side note. My mom listened to the podcast and she said, Joe, I loved the podcast. And I said, yeah, it's going to start out great when John says, let me tell you about my vasectomy. That's not exactly what he said, but it was pretty out there right away. But also, I want to thank every one of you who have downloaded this podcast as well as even the podcast before John Green. That one, I believe it had to do with your tears. Your tears taste wonderful or something like that.
Cheers taste.
Oh, your cheers are delicious. That's what it is. And I said it in my creepy Cartman voice as I was typing it. But yes, thank you for downloading. That was actually probably our biggest 24-hour download period, was between uploading that and then that podcast and then recording the John Green. We hit 95, and that was just a very quick turnaround for us. So thank you guys for downloading. Thank you for spreading the word. Thanks for telling everybody. Yes, thank you guys so much. So let's go ahead and let's move on to Crystal Palace. So Klopp gets the boys back from the third international break of the year. Robbo and Mo stayed back. Virgil came back a bit early. He was healthy. They said it was for a personal matter. Some of us were surprised to see that Mo was not in the starting lineup. Jim, what was your initial reaction when you saw the lineup?
Well, first of all, let me qualify everything I say tonight with this. I've seen the extended match highlights, and I listened to the match live. So I have not seen the whole match. But, of course, I was listening to the pre-match audio and heard the starting lineups come out. And first of all, I wasn't surprised. We know that Mo picked up kind of that ankle knock against Man City. Even given the international break, I think Klopp just wanted to be more safe rather than sorry. So I wasn't so much surprised by that. I was a little bit nervous. That Ox was lined up on the left side of the front three. I know we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, but I'm not sure that that's his best position. I think he does a bit better in the middle. So, and given our history at Selhurst Park, which I know, I think before this match, we'd actually won, I want to say the last 5 matches before this against Crystal Palace. So, but matches at Selhurst Park are always difficult. And I don't think this match was any exception. So I was nervous. That was, to boil it down into a nutshell, I was nervous.
Okay, so Boback, what were your thoughts when you saw the lineup come across? First of all, were you at Union Jack or not?
No, I actually had to work during the game, so I put myself on social media blackout like normal when I have to do that, and caught the match whenever I got home from work. So I was able to see the lineup before it went live. I usually like to do that and then stew over it for about 3 hours before I get to watch the match. But to be honest with you, the big surprise wasn't necessarily that Salah wasn't starting, but for me that Robbo was, because I kind of figured Salah would probably be rested and might be used as a sub. But I thought, Crystal Palace might have been a game that you could throw Milner in at left back and feel relatively comfortable since Zaha is generally going to attack down the other side of the pitch, so he wouldn't necessarily be challenged as much as Robbo. And I figured you wouldn't want to risk him as much because there isn't as much of a like for like replacement for him. I feel like he's far more missed out of the lineup than a 70% Salah, which we'll normally throw in there. If he's got 1 foot, we'll normally play him. But I think
he's out there hopping, right?
I think Robbo actually starting was the big surprise for me. But everything that I had heard leading up to the game, I wasn't shocked that Salah wasn't starting.
Yeah, I was more surprised that he made the bench but wasn't in the starting lineup. And then even came on as a sub later on. I think that was kind of a big surprise for me, because I figure, maybe Klopp wanted to give him a little bit more time and figured that Crystal Palace was the match to do it, and maybe give Ox a little bit of a reward because I think he played pretty well from what I was reading in the international break as well. So that's something to do. I don't know though. It sounds about the Robbo. It sounds like this injury is going to be lingering for a while. So he's playing through pain. Hopefully he doesn't damage himself. We've all heard the horror stories about those pain injections. that they give players. Well, mainly American football players. Pat McAfee has gone on about it before. So hopefully they're not doing that with Robbo, and then he's just playing through the pain and making the injury worse. So that's kind of my big fear, especially with a big December coming up. But proceeding on though, on paper it seemed that the Reds should just come out and destroy Palace. They at the time they weren't that far from the relegation zone. I guess they still aren't. They have Woy. He'll just come out and park the bus and then look for a counterattack. Been there, done that so much this season. We might get a 1-0 or a 2-1 win and squeak it out. But it didn't really come out that way. I know I was surprised. I think Roy set up the team to come out at us a bit more than usual. Was I imagining things, or did I just fall asleep during the match, Boback?
I think if anything, Palace just probably gained some confidence in the way that they had started the match, and they kind of just went along with it. I think they would have preferred to, and I think like you had mentioned, they would have probably preferred to sit back and absorb pressure and just hit on the counter, because I think over the last 12 months or so they've had like the third or fourth best away record in the Premier League, and a lot of that has to do because you naturally set up when you're away from home to defend and counter, and that's kind of their bread and butter. Yeah. So I think them being kind of on top and feeling like they were kind of coming at us a little bit more was more along the lines of how crap we were, and kind of invited it, if anything, by not being able to piece some passes together.
I think you hit it well. Crap how we were, and it's just like usually when we come back from international break, we have a crappy game, and that's why I always hate those international break. And then we play a big top 6 team. So I'm glad to play Crystal Palace, and glad we got a win on that. But we'll get there. So both teams are deadlocked with a few chances early, but Palace seems to have broken the deadlock. The ball comes in from, basically a corner, and Ginny kind of flicks it on, and it finds Palace player. I'm sorry, the name forgot me. Was it Townsend? No, it wasn't Townsend.
Townsend. It was Townsend.
It was Townsend.
Tompkins.
Yes,
Tompkins.
James Tompkins.
Yeah, James Tompkins found him back post, and he and it looks almost certainly a goal. VAR reviews all goals and calls this one out. AU, I believe it was deemed to have shoved Lovren down as he was going to make a play on the ball. VAR calls it a foul and rules out the goal. On this one, I can see it both ways. Was there contact? Yes. Did Lovren make a meal of it? Maybe. Would he have gotten to the ball? I don't really know, but you can see that he's already starting to break towards where it's going to be. But, would he have been close enough to make that jump? So, Jim, I want to come to you first. What's your take on it? And then, Boback, you're going to get your voice as well.
So on my answer, I'm going to be the anti-Brian, and I won't say here's why you're wrong, because I pretty much agree with everything you just said there, Joe. I think, those that complained about the call, so being biased, I don't necessarily want to say, yes, you critics are right. But I agree. The call could have gone either way, I think. I think IU clearly shoved Lovren, but whether he shoved him hard enough to make him tumble like he did is certainly another question. But apparently the referee thought that was the VAR, which, do you guys remember who it was, or whether that really makes any difference?
No, I have no idea.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it made a difference this week. It wasn't any of the hated ones.
It wasn't Atkinson or somebody like that. So, right. So, yeah. I mean, apparently the VAR ref thought it was a clear and obvious miss by the head referee. So there you go. But back to your original point, Joe. Not to just repeat what you said, but I agree with you. I think it could have gone either way, but Liverpool gets a call, as people the critics like to say.
Yeah, I even saw by the way, I even saw a shop on DHgate that has Liverpool as Liverpool. I don't know if it was a typo or not, but I think I don't think it was, because I think the VAR was all capitalized. Boback, what was your take, man? Was this obvious foul, or were we kind of lucky to get away with one?
Well, it took till about the third or fourth replay for me to actually see what they were reviewing when they were showing it, and during the game, after all anytime you have a flick at the near post and it's on like you said, almost the corner, it was pretty close to the end line. Mm-hmm. My first thought was they would be looking at, I was crossing my fingers for potentially Tompkins being offsides at the far post and maybe moving too soon, and that flicked header catching him off while Liverpool are pushing up. But that's what I was looking at the entire time that they kept showing the replay over and over again, was the offside. I didn't even think about any type of potential foul in the box. And when they finally showed that, it was, to me, it was clear. You can say it's soft, but I think we're kind of just ingrained to saying that because people have been getting away with it in the past, whether it be defenders pushing attackers in the back so that they can't get a good header on the ball in those corners, or grabbing them and holding them down so they can't get any type of lift on their jump. And I think we're just kind of ingrained to seeing that particular action in the box, that when something like that is called, it kind of stirs that reaction. But it's 100% the correct call, especially if you go back and think about the foul that actually led to that particular free kick. Was an extremely soft foul, Trent on Zaha. Zaha had kind of just sold it a little bit. I think Trent maybe touched him in the back, and I think maybe his knee maybe touched Zaha's thigh while he was running. Something of that nature. It, to me, was a very soft foul. So I think the referee was, if he was going to look to do that, how they traditionally say that they almost try and make up for their previous call.
I thought they said they did.
In those circumstances, you would have thought that he was maybe looking for something like that to happen, but being that the referee didn't see the foul, and the video assistant referee had to let him know, I think that was kind of the clear indicator that they were going to reverse it. Was obviously I would love to hear the conversations that go on between the video assistant referee and the center referee. But my assumption is that they asked him if he had even seen it.
And he probably did. If he had,
and my guess is, you have all that action in the box. You have the flicked header. You're following the ball. You're following the cross. You're watching all that stuff. That it's very difficult to see. And they probably just asked if he saw it. And if he didn't see it, then that's clear and obvious error. If he'd seen it and deemed it not to be enough to give a foul, then they would have allowed it. So that's my thought on it. So it can go either way in regards to whether or not it should have been reversed. But if you're asking whether it was a foul, it was 100% a foul.
I think I was thinking to myself, how did they even notice it? Because like you said, I know I had to watch it 3 or 4 times till I even saw what they were seeing. And this is even, watching the Inside Palace replay the other, I think it was earlier this morning. But especially when you're on that ground level of seeing it, and there's just bodies everywhere. I don't know how you can see it. So I think the only way that they really noticed that there might have been something to look at was Dejan Lovren complaining after the ball goes in. I mean, he's on the ground and his arms are going, what the heck? Complaining, where's the foul at on it?
That's a clear example of why video assistant referee was introduced.
So this is a great example of why. Yeah.
It's so difficult to see all that happening at one point. And like I said, traditionally we're used to seeing all kinds of pushing and shoving and grappling and holding and all that stuff on corners and free kicks in the box. And kind of the introduction of VAR was going to scare everyone straight and hopefully eliminate a lot of that. We haven't really seen any, I would call them Martin Skirtle penalties, to where, the corner kick comes in and the end, the referee immediately blows the whistle and gives a penalty because, hey, so-and-so he had his shirt pulled or was holding him down or pushing him.
Martin shirt grab.
This is, so those are kind of like the, probably might be the first example of something like that being overturned for a correct call, but one that people are kind of confused about because they're used to seeing it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Jim, you want to come back at all? Anything, or let's just go ahead and move on?
No, I think we've adequately covered that.
All right. So the rest of the first half seems to be a bit boring and uneventful. That's what I had, but it also might have been because when I was watching the replay back, I'm pretty sure I fell asleep. The second half starts, and it doesn't take too long before Liverpool are on the board. Robbo plays the ball in a bit awkwardly, but Bobby tries to unsuccessfully bring it down. It falls to Mane. He shoots, ball kisses off of both posts, and Liverpool lead 1-0 at Selhurst Park. Sadio Mane is the only Liverpool player to score the last 4 times the Reds have faced Crystal Palace. Is there anything to add or celebrate or correct me on that goal, gentlemen?
No, I think you hit that kind of right on the head, but I think kind of a more impressive stat for Sadio Mane is that that's his 8th goal in 11 games against Crystal Palace.
Yeah, going back to Southampton, right?
Yeah, starting to be his Suarez and Norwich club right there.
There we go. Okay. So as I recall, Roy Hodgson likes to break down matches, at least in his game plan into segments, attack a bit, defend a bit, etc. So during one of those attacking segments, Palace pull level. I want to talk about this goal for a minute. At least we'll start off with how I viewed it, and go ahead and feel free to tell me I'm wrong or I'm completely don't understand the sport. But I think most of this goal goes to Wilfried Zaha playing very intelligently. So he knows that we tend to play zonal marking. He's bringing the ball down his left side, our right side. I forget who it was, but one of his players cuts out to the left. He plays the ball to him and then starts moving inside. He plays it to the left, knowing that Lovren knows that Trent is still in the recovery position. He comes over to pressure the attack of the other Palace player. So then I remember watching this replay back, and I just watched Zaha, and he just scoots his way across our defense, finding the holes in the zone, and then the ball finds Benteke, who is just lucky and gets it to Zaha, and Zaha lets it run on to his right foot, and that plays Robbo out, and he just slots it home. I mean, it was a great goal from Zaha. I think we really could have done better defensively, but Jim, what do you think about watching back about Zaha's goal?
I think your focus on talking about the Palace smartly playing the zone was right on. It made me rewatching that goal. It made me think of basketball teams when they're attacking a zone defense, and you try to pass the ball around relatively quickly so you can get the zone to shift and open somebody up. And to a certain extent, I think that's what happened. And I agree. I think Zaha was just really, really smart in the way he played that, and really finished very, very well. So well done to him.
Boback, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, having myself, I'm more of a winger type player when I personally play, and in regards to what Zaha did, I think probably the most intelligent thing he did in that build up to the goal was instead of running into the space that Benteke was occupying with the ball on the left side, he moved centrally to the space that Benteke had vacated with his run. So, if you're a defender, you have to make the decision as to who's going to mark him when you have your center back that's pulled out to the right hand side to mark Benteke, and Trent trying to cover back and help on the cutback, which throughout that game previously was Henderson's job, doubling up on that left side, their left side, our right side. So, I mean, the most intelligent thing he did was find that central space in the box where you would not expect to see someone who spends the majority of his time on the touchline. So when he's there centrally, you're looking at Robertson marking two people in the box because Van Dijk shifts over to cover the space that Lovren vacated to go cover Benteke. Then you have both Townsend, who had moved centrally from his position out on the right, and then Zaha, obviously, who ran into that space. So, once the ball came across, it came across to Townsend. Townsend just made one little touch over to Zaha, and Robertson's basically 1-on-2 at that point. And I think Origi tried his best to recover and get in front of Zaha, but he was a little too late on that. And, for someone who hasn't had his best season in front of goal, Zaha's first Premier League goal of the season, he took that like someone with all the confidence in the world. Very intelligently let it run across his body befone he, comfortably just passed it in the goal.
Yeah, it was great.
As you see, not everyone has that type of composure. 10 minutes later, same thing happens. He's put into a position to put his side or equalize for his side, and completely blasted over the goal. So, it altogether, that's a goal that I would have been impressed for Liverpool to score. So you got to hand it to Palace. It's not usually the type of football you expect from a Roy Hodgson side, but they did well.
So I'm sitting at my son's basketball game, listening to match audio. I'm certain that this match is going to be a draw. I'm calculating the points. I'm getting pissed at Brendan and Leicester because they come, they're winning, and then I'm thinking most of the EPL are laughing. Typical Liverpool ballers. And then a late corner for Liverpool. The ball comes in. Virgil almost uncontested at the front post. Seriously, I was just thinking about this, and it reminds me of a Sadio Mane kind of run. Like, out of nowhere is Virgil van Dijk. He does kind of one of the, like a half jump. The ball hits his feet. It's a great save by the Palace keeper. The ball bounces around the six-yard box for a bit, and Palace fail to clear. The ball falls to Bobby Firmino. There's something that the cop wants you to know. The best in the world is Bobby Firmino, our number 9. Give him the ball, and he'll score every time. Si, senor. Pass the ball to Bobby, and he will score. 2-1 Liverpool. Liverpool still top of the league on 8 points. And, yes, that's the top of the table. And why did I put that in there twice? So, that was a pretty awesome goal. I mean, man, it was just exciting. It was all I could do. I mean, it's like 8 and 9-year-olds playing basketball. So, I'm not going to be jumping around for that. But it was everything I did with my power not to be jumping around, just hooting and hollering. And then we had the 5-minute wait, and Palace are in their attack mode. And we haven't been great all day. So, it's one of those things. But they hold on and win. So, Jim, how are you feeling? I think you were listening at this time. How are you feeling about the Bobby goal?
Well, before it, I was in the same frame of mind as you. I mentioned this in the last podcast. I started thinking back to that awful night in 2014 when we were 3 goals up on Palace, and then they came back and equalized. And there goes basically one thread of our title hopes that season. And I started thinking about the same thing, of course. But to a certain extent, I also didn't feel super worried in that, what Bobby did and what this team does is something we've continually seen this season. There's a grit to them that in seasons past was not there. And, there's part of it's just a hunger. I really think that this team, and I'm stating the obvious here, but they really want the Premier League trophy, and they're doing everything they can to try to get there. So you just really can never count this side out in a match this season. And I hope that continues, because I think it does us a lot of credit. I think it does the way that Klopp handles the team a lot of credit. And here's hoping that we keep doing that.
Boback, man, how scared was your dog when you were jumping off the couch yelling?
Well, thankfully Sunday was pretty nice outside, so I was able to throw him out in the yard while I was watching the game, because I knew what kind of reaction he'd get. But thankfully, I want to say that I was completely thrown off guard, but I really wasn't. Watching this team this season, it's having a supreme amount of confidence. One of the first things I did when Palace equalized was look at the clock, and there's a solid 10 minutes plus added time to be added in there, and it didn't take them very long. I think that you've seen that with this side, that no, we're not as defensively solid as we were last year. We're giving up way too many goals, but also you can take a look at their mentality. This is the type of team that's okay with giving up a goal, because they know they're getting one right back. So I think the difference was Zaha scored in, I think, the 82nd minute or something like that, and Bobby's goal was in the 85th minute. So it's almost straight off the first attack that we had on them. So I didn't really have enough time to be depressed about the possibility of us dropping points in that match. Keep in mind, at this same time, while I'm watching it, the City-Chelsea game is going on at this point. So I'm not able to check in and see what's going on there, out of fear that I might ruin the game that I'm watching. So the fact that I hadn't really gotten bombarded with any texts or anything like that, it kind of led me to believe that things were going to be okay, in my opinion. But the reaction, it was not the prettiest goal of all time.
No, it would have been if that Virgil shot had gone in. Let's put it that way, because you don't expect that from Virgil.
Yeah, it was a jammy ass goal, and I think what the most joy I took out of that was thinking about all the rival fans watching that goal, because they're thinking, the exact same thing I was thinking for a decade and a half, 2 decades watching Manchester United, was that, God, that is a shit ass goal. That is unlucky for Palace. That is unbelievable. Of course they would get that goal. And if, it's lovely to have it on our end this time, and it's completely deserved. I mean, when you go in there and that you're going to come away with a winner, at least have a chance to win the game, then you usually end up creating those type of jammy chances and putting them away. So I can't really say how I reacted, because I was living in the moment. But if there were 3 dogs in the house like there could have been, then I might have had some broken furniture, I'll tell you that much.
They would have heard the barking 3 blocks away, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think I just kind of came up with an idea. I had a note in here that I'm not used to this never say die attitude by Liverpool. I think we're just going to start calling it the Goonies attitude, because, Goonies never say die. So, I'm just not used to seeing the Goonies attitude, but, I really like it. You brought up a great point there, Boback. We're used to, I think maybe Jim and I aren't ready to embrace, even though we need to, we just haven't mentally embraced this. Okay, they score, but we're going to score again. We're not going to let this game slip away yet. So
I'm almost there. I'm like the finish line is 5 yards away, and I'm getting there.
All right.
I'm getting there. I'm getting to the finish line of believing in this team no matter what, and not having the same old attitude the past 20 years of thinking it's all going to go to shit.
It's all going to shit. Yeah.
Well, let me throw something out there for you guys. 8 goals after the 85th minute. That's how many goals Liverpool have scored after the 85th minute this season. Not under Klopp in general. This season.
Yeah.
8 goals after the 85th minute.
Great point.
So
Boback.
we're going to get a late chance, if not a late goal, every single game. We've played 13 games in the Premier League and scored 8 goals after the 85th minute. So when I say I looked at the clock and saw what time they scored, I knew we would at least get a chance.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so there were a couple players I really wanted to talk about, and I'll leave some space for you guys. I thought Trent was terrible. I mean, this is probably the worst Trent Alexander-Arnold performance I think we've seen all season. We mentioned a little bit earlier, Palace had some good chances early in the match. Trent was trying to do one of his passes to Robbo cross field, and it just falls right to Andros Townsend, and he's in space. You can't give Andros Townsend space because he'll put in a worldie. And we've seen it already this season. It was like first weekend, I think Brian was talking about it. So I was really kind of disappointed in Trent. But am I being too pessimistic on him, Boback, or do you think maybe Trent really had a bad game as well?
No, I think it's understandable, and I think it is kind of subjective as to what your definition of a bad game is. He's put in some pretty world-class performances as of late the last couple weeks, and he's had the spotlight on him quite a bit, deservingly. I thought he had a pretty difficult game passing the ball, which has typically been his strong point. Mm-hmm. He did still have a few Gerrard-esque, Xabi Alonso-esque 40, 50-yard perfect crossfield balls to Ox and Robbo that I can recall. But he did have a pretty rough time passing the ball, but he was very good defensively on Zaha all game. So that's why I say you can be subjective in regards to terrible game. But I think what we're used to seeing from him is his offensive side, the glitz and the glamour, the assists, the crosses. He didn't have a whole lot of that against Palace. He was struggling a little bit with that. But on the defensive end, he was very good on Zaha. It's no it's no coincidence that their best chance came when Trent was essentially out of the picture. I think we had lost the ball in midfield, and Trent tried to recover to get back on Zaha. That's when he passed it to Benteke, and we know what happened from there. But there's video of probably about 5 or 6 instances to where Zaha is isolated against Trent one-on-one, and Trent gets the better of him. And when you have someone as dangerous as Wilfried Zaha in space, it doesn't matter who's out there on defending him. You would expect him to get the better of the defender once or twice, and it looks like Trent had him in his pocket most of that time.
I don't remember it that way, but that's not saying much. I thought Zaha kind of had him most of the day, and you know what? I'm usually willing to admit that I'm wrong.
He had a lot of the ball, but he didn't go anywhere with it.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, Brian's always telling you're wrong. So keep that in mind. I just want to throw in one more thing, and you can either take it or leave it. As I said, I just listened to the audio. So I can't make a completely informed judgment on Trent's play. But he also did in the international break play most of the 2 matches that England played in. Now I know that he doesn't exactly do the same things in Southgate's system that he does for us, but still, I mean, he's barreling up the wing every once in a while for England. So, he's an active player. So, to a certain extent, for what you perceive, Joe, maybe fatigue has a little bit to do with that. But I'm to a certain extent just kind of spitballing. So,
and that's
take
also
that for what it's.
And of all the former Manchester United players that are still playing, Wilfred Zaha, I'd take him on our team. I honestly think he'd have a spot in our team. It might be Sadio Mane's backup, but I think he could add to this team. I said it before when we talked about transfers. I wouldn't mind getting Wilfred Zaha in. I think he's happy at Palace, and good for him. I mean, every player needs to be happy at some point in their career, for their career, and to get the best. He struggled a bit this year, so Trent did have a tough draw going up against Zaha. I mean, if he's quality enough to play for Liverpool, then that's talking about how, at least in my mind, how good of a player Zaha is typically. Boback, what did you think about excuse me, Ox coming in and playing for Mane?
Well, he's kind of shown in his time at Liverpool that he's kind of evolved away from being just the speedy guy on the wing, which is what he was generally typecasted as at Arsenal. Arsene Wenger would throw him out in a winger in his 4-3-3 or towards the end of his time there as a wing back. He's certainly not at his best when he's kind of shoved out there on the right side, and I think he showed that a little bit. I was slightly disappointed in performance. I didn't necessarily think he had a bad one, but I think we could have maybe gotten a little bit more from Origi or Gini being part of the front three, or even doing what I had maybe anticipated whenever the lineup would come out was maybe moving him more centrally and having the two up front with Bobby and Mane, both kind of just alternating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think he operates a lot better with being centrally. So, would I want to see an extended period of time with Mo Salah being on the sideline? Certainly not, because I'm not too confident in our options. But he can do a trick every once in a while. I wouldn't mind Ox being out there every 4 or 5 games for a bit to give him a spell or something of that nature, because he is fast. He does like to take players on, so he can certainly do a job out there, but wasn't necessarily his best performance. And going back to what Jim had kind of said with Trent, both him and Trent had started and played quite substantially for England over the international break. And when you're Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain been out of the game for so long, 3 games in the space of 2 weeks is maybe pushing it a little bit in regards to his overall peak fitness. So he may have been struggling a little bit in that end, but I understand why Klopp maybe thought of him as the option to solve it, with being how good a form he was. And if you're going to put somebody in, this is the time to do it when your star guy's out. So
yeah. Jim didn't watch the match, so he won't have much to add on that. So anything else on the players before we move to man of the match? Anything else really that struck out to you guys that are a good talking point for this match?
I think we can go ahead and be happy that the next international break isn't until March
28th.
Because these sluggish performances following the international break, especially when we end up always getting thrown out at some tough away grounds following a big game. I don't know how the Premier League does it. We always have a big match before the international break, so we're completely high on momentum. The international break comes and we end up getting thrown in at the away side, one of the tough away grounds, and having to slog it out. So I'm completely happy that we don't have to do that for quite some time, and I'm very happy to not have to play Crystal Palace away again this season.
Good point. Speaking of international break, next international break, our good friend Rustin has said that we need to have a for you that are in Indianapolis area, an LFC Indy get together during this international break. It may or may not be at Rustin's house. I think it'd be a great spot. He'll smoke up some meat on his smoker. We'll play some Subbuteo. Maybe play a little FIFA, watch some college basketball. So pencil that in on your calendars. Indy Reds party at Rustin's for March 28th. He's probably gonna get pissed at me for saying that, but sorry about that, dude. All right, so man of the match, Jim. Do you have anybody that you want to say, or do you want to abstain?
Well, let me again first qualify this with that my selection is the audio man of the match. So, I think you could make a legitimate argument for either Virgil, Mane, or Bobby, because, like for many people, he's a sentimental favorite of mine. I'm going to go with Bob.
All right, Boback.
Watching the game, I was struggling to think of someone that really stood out.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that is, naturally you watch to see offensively someone that stood out in those circumstances. And, Mane got the goal. Bobby got the winner. But one thing that was consistent was Van Dijk. That whole game was winning every single header, and it's easy to do when you've got Jordan Ayew in the box. But when you're up there for the last 30 minutes and you're facing Christian Benteke, who's one of the as shite as he's been the last couple of years for Palace, he's still one of the deadliest headers of the ball in the Premier League. And so I thought Van Dijk was immense, in the pressure cooker of the game there towards the last 30 minutes when they were certainly putting the pressure on to try and equalize. And I would say, a solid mention, maybe an honorable mention, not necessarily a top three type of performance, for Dejan Lovren for doing his part in that as well.
Yeah.
So I would say Van Dijk. It's almost like kind of like the argument with the Ballon d'Or, where you almost try and find someone else to give it to instead of giving it to Messi every year. Because Van Dijk is he's like that every single match, but I think it stood out more when the rest of the team wasn't playing well, that him with his usual immense performance got us over the line.
That's a good point, Boback. I'm gonna go with Sadio Mane just because of the record and the goal. And I don't know if I've given it to Mane recently, so I'll give it to Sadio Mane, but very close honorable mention of Van Dijk. Boback brings up some very great points on that. And Bobby was my other choice, by the way, Jim. So we don't usually do this next section, but we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the EPL. There's been quite a bit to talk about. So news broke just as the players were getting back from international duty that Tottenham Hotspur had sacked Mauricio Pochettino. Then later, maybe the next day, it was announced that good old Jose Mourinho is their new manager at Tottenham Hotspur. So, first of all, it's a two-parter, and I'm going to come to you first, Boback. What did you think of Spurs sacking Ponch? And then, what about the Mourinho signing to be the highest-paid EPL manager? What? Well,
the Poch sacking, to me, honestly, wasn't as big of a surprise as it may have been to other people. I think for me it was inevitable that he wasn't going to last very much longer. His demeanor, his tolerance with just overall the media, with questions and things like that, have been growing. He's been a lot more tolerable in those types of scenarios. And then going back to the summer where he had mentioned that, if they were going to win the Champions League, he would consider maybe stepping down after that, because there was nothing else to do. So I think he's lost his ambition at Spurs. I think he thinks he's gone as far as he can with them, and it's starting to show in his players. So that wasn't as big a surprise. That and Vegas always knows somehow his odds slashed from like 8-1 to 2-1 to be the next manager sacked like during the international break. So, there was certainly some rumblings there. Now, the Jose hire, when that first kind of came up, I was watching it all kind of live on Twitter. When that name came up, I thought it was one of those where his agent's kind of tooting his horn, trying to get his name out there for any single big job, just so that when there is the job that does come around, he'll be considered for those certain circumstances. That all kind of came on like a house on fire. And that I was completely shocked about, because if you're talking about a manager that needs to operate on a budget, that is the worst manager you can possibly throw out there.
Yeah.
Especially with their ethos over the last 5 or 6 years under Pochettino has been to buy these young, emerging stars, kind of like what FSG tried to come in, the Moneyball approach here, and build versus Mourinho has traditionally always looked at veteran players that he knows can win right now, that cost a shit ton and have super high wages.
Yeah.
Plus, you're looking at the complete turnaround in regards to their wage policy when you're talking about players like Eriksen and Alderweireld and Vertonghen and Rose that are all not signing new contracts. A lot of that has to do with maybe they want to move on and don't want anyone standing in their way, but probably a lot of it has to do with the contract offer that was offered to them was well below what they thought their value was, because Spurs have a very tight wage structure. So then you go ahead and fire one of the most in-demand managers and bring in the most expensive manager and pay him the most out of any manager in the Premier League, even the two-time Premier League defending champion and the defending Champions League winner make half as much as this manager that you just brought in. So yeah. I think all that stuff is super shocking, but it all really leads to one thing, is that it sounds like Daniel Levy's kind of just he's gonna I got to win something at all costs, and he's hiring the manager that he knows will at least win him something. Now, whether that's a League Cup down the road, obviously not this season since they lost to Colchester, but whether it be an FA Cup or a League Cup or something like that, get something on the board. He knows that Jose will at least do that in his time there, and I think he's willing to deal with the mess that it's gonna leave at the end of it.
Jim, same questions. If you need a refresher, let me know.
No, I think I'm good. I think Boback's spoken pretty eloquently about the way that Spurs have approached just financially. Just to add to that, not necessarily from a financial standpoint, I agree that maybe they're looking just that they need to win something. And I was, watching the after show that Rebecca Lowe does with Robbie Earl and Kyle Martino on NBC Sports. You can watch it on YouTube. I think it's called The Lowdown, if I'm not mistaken. And they were talking about the hire. And one thing she brought up is, that given the personnel that Spurs have, this is the trophy obviously that they would want to shoot for would be the Champions League. And she thought that they, that with Mourinho on board, they could potentially go pretty far in the tournament. I'm not sure that they could win it. I really am kind of skeptical about that. But the other thing that comes to mind is, for me, Mourinho is, there's of course been sort of a little bit of a honeymoon period here so far, and that Spurs looked pretty sharp in their first league match under Mourinho. They went down today in their Champions League match
No, they won.
I think Olympiacos.
Yeah. No, they went down 2-0, and then they come back and win 4-2. Yeah, wild.
Right, and I know you have a talking point here on the outline. Is it just a matter of time before Mourinho scapegoating Eric Dyer? Well, one of the players that Mourinho brought off when they were playing poorly was Eric Dyer. Actually, it was the player that so back to my point. Yeah, we have this honeymoon period going on here, but and I say this as an unrepentant Mourinho. I don't know if hater is the right word, but somebody just that does not respect aerial style, both in tactics and the way that he deals with players. I think it's only a matter of time before we get the same old Mourinho. You can call it a leopard doesn't change his spots, a tiger doesn't change his stripes, or whatever the metaphor you want to use. I just don't see where this ends up being a situation where Mourinho actually sees out his contract at Tottenham. How long did he sign for? What's the duration?
I don't know, but he's got
2022.
He's got 3 years. I mean, that's his usual thing. So, I mean, 2022, that's going to do it. That's 3 years.
Yeah, that's his sell by date. But he, I give it at most 2 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I give it at most 2 years before he's gone. Before
it's completely toxic there. Because, I mean, Jimmy kind of foreshadowed my point. Because, I mean, I was watching Match of the Day, and where they're showing the post-match interviews, and excuse the bad Josie impersonation, but he's like, I cannot take credit for this. It was all the players. That was a bad French accent. I don't know why, because he's Portuguese. Anyway, he said, I cannot take credit for this win. It was all the players. And I almost had to scoop my jaw up off the floor, because that is so not Jose Mourinho that we've seen. 2 stints at Chelsea, as well as, everywhere else he's been, including Manchester United. It was first me, and I'm flabbergasted. So Jim already says it's a matter of time before we see the same old Josie. Boback, what are you thinking, man? A matter of time? Or has he maybe learned that his previous attitude towards players was what's been getting him in trouble and costing him?
Yeah, I mean, that's the curiosity there, and we've never thankfully had to endure it with our club, but the last 2 clubs he's been at, he's left in relative ruins following, and a circus usually is on its way within a year and a half, but you've got to think that with Daniel Levy and Jose Mourinho sewing this deal up so quickly, there had to have been discussions. Both sides have to know, with history of pretty public about how each are. The chairman of Tottenham is relatively tight in spending, and Jose Mourinho is relatively loose with spending other people's money. There has to be some understanding between the two. And I don't know if this is maybe Jose Mourinho maybe being brought down to earth for being away from the game for a year. I think he was let go from United right around this time last year after we played him. I think it was the beginning of December maybe. When we beat them. That was his last game for United. So he's been out for a year and really hasn't had any offers. And that might have brought him back down to earth. Now, whether or not it's a matter of time before we see same old Mourinho, I think that's a given. But I think, like I mentioned, Daniel Levy saw the writing on the wall, and I think he sees his talented Spurs side here. He knows he's got great players in this side, and I think he's desperate to win a trophy. He sees their sell-by date coming close, and is putting someone in, putting all his chips in on the one manager that usually guarantees you a trophy. So 3 years, I don't think it'll be that long, but I think he'll certainly win something in the year and a half, 2 years that he's with the club before it eventually all goes wrong.
You brought up a great point about sell by date, because let's be honest, how many of these players are already expecting to see leave at the end of the season? Christian Eriksen almost left last year. I don't know what happened there, but it fell through at Real Madrid. They might come back in because I'm pretty sure Eden Hazard hasn't worked out very well for him. There's been talks about Harry Kane leaving. That would bring in a whole bunch of income there, and the names just keep adding up, because we've heard about how these players are just kind of like, okay, we finally are seeing Dele Alli playing the Dele Alli that we wanted, that we've grown to know. And granted, it was West Ham, who's been terrible, and Pellegrini looks like he's probably going to get sacked by Christmas as well. But it's just like, when are these guys going to leave, or are they expecting to sell Harry Kane in the summer, and then there's their war chest to buy to bring in Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who's already saying he wants to keep playing, just as an example. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what to believe. I don't know if it's just a matter of time, or if this is the true or Josie really has changed the colors. I don't know. But continuing on with Premier League, we've already mentioned Pellegrini, Unai Emery. I mean, it's after every match that that Arsenal plays a shit show, his name's getting tossed around. And Marco Silva, I mean, gosh, I hope if Everton fire Marco Silva, please let it be after we destroy them in the derby. Please, 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 everything that's holy. I would just love that. So, I mean, all those going around. I mean, Ollie's still treading water at United, especially now. People are saying that at least United supporters are saying, hey, Ponch is out there. Let's get him, and he's in the wings. So I'm not sure if that one happens or not, especially before the end of the season. But, that's just my my Bucko 5. So other news, City's still bitching about VAR against Liverpool, even though Sterling had a goal called back for a debatable offsides. I was going to bring it up with Brian, because we know Brian loves talking about offsides and VAR. Boback, did you see this at all? Do you have anything you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, I mean, I was able to catch the last 10 minutes of that match after I was done watching ours, and my first thought when they scored that goal was he's such a quick player that there has to be a millimeter of his body that was offside on that. And I was just crossing my fingers. I mean, I really don't have much to add. It's the same argument that's been talked about. The people that hate it in regards to being such a close decision, just letting it go, aren't going to be swayed any other way. And the people that are letter of the law, offside is offside. It's the only black and white call you essentially have in this type of game. There's no subjectivity to it. Are gonna keep their same opinion. It's just one of those decisions where next match day isn't until Saturday, so we need something to talk about.
There you go. Yeah,
it ultimately didn't cost them any points, so no. I don't know why it's being discussed. I mean, I really don't see any way that you can solve it. There are leagues, MLS in particular, to where they use the clear and obvious error notion in their offside call. They don't have the lines when they're using VAR for offside. But then you have the decision that happened in the conference final between Galaxy and I think that
Toronto.
it wasn't the conference final.
Seattle,
It was the conference semifinal between Galaxy and LAFC, where LAFC's goal was offside, and VAR couldn't even overrule it because they said it wasn't clear and obvious. Versus if you watched it, 2 or 3 times and slowed it down, you could see that it was offside. So I mean, you're gonna have those. So what would you rather have? Goals disallowed for the correct decision, and just have essentially people being upset about a close call going against their team, or would you have a goal count for someone that was offside? I mean, if you're going by the letter, or not the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law and the spirit of the game, where they, within the last 30 years changed it to where the offensive player has to be level, or level is onside, then you have the people that are going to argue that, well, if it's that close, then you should just let it go. But where do you draw the line then? You're talking about margins. So I think there's going to be a call like this every single week. When it happens in a game that involves Man City or Liverpool, then it's going to be talked about. Yeah. Anyone else, it's fine.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's just ridiculous. By the way, going back real quick, I did pull up Christian Eriksen on Transfer Market. He's able to talk to other clubs in January. His contract expires at the end of the season. Well, July 1st, whatever, around there.
Well, him, Vertonghen, Alderweireld, and Rose are all out of contract in the summer. That was the big deal. Was that everyone had kind of expected Spurs to at least sell some of those players so that you get something out of it, and now that none of those players went, that's what's kind of rumored to have caused all the unrest in the Spurs side, and why they're playing so poorly, and why Eriksen and Vertonghen have kind of been out of the side for the majority of the season. So yeah, that's going to be something they're going to have to contend with come January, really. Like you mentioned, come January, they can talk to clubs outside of England for inside pre-contract agreements.
So maybe that's what Real Madrid decided to do. So they don't have to spend so much money. Anyway, moving from one club in turmoil to another club in turmoil. Liverpool next play, depending on when you listen to this, tomorrow, Wednesday, playing Napoli in the Champions League. So I'm seeing some reports that Napoli are struggling, and besides that, Insigne's injured and is going to miss the match. But other than that, things really aren't good between the directors of the club and the team. So just kind of a breakdown. I was reading this one article, so feel free to fact check me. Go to Snopes or whatever, or report me for fake news, whatever. Apparently,
should I call Brian? Should I call Brian so he could call in and say, "Here's where you're wrong"?
No, I don't know. Maybe maybe get Breitbart and see if I'm on their conspiracy theory list or not. All right. So anyway, apparently after Napoli lost to Roma on November 2nd, the team was sent to a special training camp and not allowed to leave the hotel. So after their Champions League match with Salzburg, they refused to go back, and now the club is saying that they will dock the players' wages. The directors are fighting with Ancelotti, and they may even sack Ancelotti if they lose to Liverpool. So things are just not good behind the club. Probably about probably worse, really, than Gillette and Hicks at Liverpool, at least in regards with relations with the players. So after all that being said, they're still tied with Liverpool on points for the top of the group. Seeing things in the press that Ancelotti thinks that this could be a turning point for the team. So what do you guys take on this? We'll come to you first, Jim. How do you think this match is going to play out? It's at Anfield.
Well, not having delved very deeply into Napoli's Serie A season and the affairs that are going on at the club, and basing my opinion on what you just said, Joe, and finally looking at the fact that we're playing this match at Anfield, I would say that we're going to go into this match with a nice leg up and stand a good chance of leapfrogging Napoli and taking possession of the top spot in the group. And that just leaves us. We've got one more match after that, right? We have to play Salzburg one more time. Is that right? At Salzburg, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that we're looking in really good shape coming out of the group, which is going to be nice heading into the knockout stage. I wish I could be more cogent and in depth with my analysis than that, but I'm not going to sit here and somewhat embarrass myself by making up things that I don't know. So I'm not going to trump my way through this discussion. So,
Boback, what? How do you think this one's shaking out?
Well, you've got to be extremely confident any match that's being played at Anfield. One thing I will mention is that we are ahead of Napoli in the group now. We're a point ahead of them. 8 points. They have 7. They are not in great form at all. I think 1 win in 7 matches overall. I don't even think they're in the top 6 in Serie A right now. I think they're around mid-table-ish right now in Serie A. They're probably the last time they won was against us. Who knows? They've had some obviously some issues with the president of the club. They're at war with essentially the leadership of the club, which can never be a good thing. We've got Liverpool in great form. They're playing in a venue where they have not lost a Champions League match since 2014. A win in this match makes us guaranteed winners of the group, which would mean the game against Salzburg in Salzburg could be a dead rubber match that we could throw the kitchen ladies in and be fine.
The tea room assistants, right?
all of this I think is going to extremely motivate us to get the job done, as well as if you're Napoli, you got to be thinking that a draw sounds really good at Anfield. So I don't think they'll be at their tip top attacking best, which the reason I feel like we've struggled against them is that they put us under a lot of pressure. And I think if they go into this match thinking that they're going to play for a draw, we'll wipe the floor with them, especially if we control the ball, which I think has been our issue a lot of times when we've played against them as well. We've struggled to control the ball, and they've kind of taken it to us. We've kind of catch them on the break, and being an Italian side and having good defenders in Koulibaly and their fullback, I think Mario Rui, had done a really good job on Salah in most of those games. I think it'll certainly be in our favor. Their top 2 attacking talents in Dries Mertens and Insigne are both struggling with injuries as well. I think Insigne is not traveling with the team, so he's not going to play. And Mertens sat the weekend match in Serie A because I think he was struggling with an injury he got over international break. So I think he's kind of an iffy as to whether or not he'll play. So there's a lot of things going in our favor, which, a more pessimistic person would say that would mean we're going to lose. But someone that's been in watching very closely this Liverpool side for 18 months can go on here with a lot of confidence. I think we win 2-0.
Well, Boback, you ran across that pessimist you just mentioned. I mean, let's look at it this way. You never corner a wounded animal. Let's remember what happened last time we played Napoli. No, I'm completely joking here. I honestly think that this has potential to be a romp by Liverpool. I mean, let's go back to that last Napoli match. The only reason why we didn't win, and because it would have shattered Napoli, is Koulibaly had a worldie. I mean, he was all over the place stopping Salah. You kind of hinted at that before. I mean, I don't think you can get another performance out of him, and I don't think Koulibaly really has a desire to put out that kind of performance, especially with the way that they're treating the club. Now, Carlo Ancelotti is a great coach, and will he maybe get in these guys' heads enough for them to play well enough? And maybe that will get some of the pressure off their back. Maybe that's what they're saying, or they're telling the players. So who knows? But seriously, if Koulibaly is anything less than world class, I mean, like best player in the world class, I think Liverpool are just going to destroy him. I mean, let's be brutally honest. Salah having missed the match, he's going to be ready to go. Sadio Mane's close to being top form. Bobby finally got off that hasn't scored duck. And you're going to have that front three, and they're going to be feeling good, and they're going to want to win this. And I think the rest of the team's going to want to show that game against Crystal Palace was a fluke, and that they're the best team in Europe, and they're out to prove it. So I think this is definitely going to be a good match for Liverpool fans, and I hope to see you all at Union Jack Pub tomorrow. Let's hope that my boss lets me go early. All right, moving on to Brighton. So Liverpool welcome Brighton on the weekend, while some of us are still stuffing ourselves with turkey, mashed potatoes, and pies. So I really hope this isn't assigned to NBC Gold, probably because I'll be busy getting ready for the shindig for the family that day. So I'll be able to watch a replay on the regular NBC app that evening. So yeah, hopefully. Boback, is it on Gold? Is it our third Gold match of the year?
It is on Gold.
Fucking A.
It's on Gold, and this is probably going to disappoint you a little bit as well, Joe. The Merseyside Derby is also on Gold on Wednesday.
How the hell are they doing that?
Oh my God.
I can't remember. I think it's Spurs United maybe is on that same day. I can't remember what there's a big match that's also the same day. A big match. I guess they two lower table teams. Sorry, over the Merseyside Derby. That they deem bigger than the Merseyside Derby, but
that's some bullshit.
Yeah,
that is some bullshit.
I think
we'll
probably
be at the pub,
be done
right?
with Gold. I think we'll probably be done with Gold after the Derby.
Well,
they will be shown at Union Jack Pub.
Yes,
I've gotten confirmation from a very, very, very source very close to the pub.
I think I'm going to have to. I think I'm going to have to cancel any plans that I have in those meetings that afternoon, and set up a remote workstation at the pub. Hopefully, we'll see what we can do. Anyway, so Brighton currently sitting in 12th, but like we said in the last pot, there isn't a lot of separation between places on the point-wise. So how are you feeling about this match? We'll go Boback first.
I think this is a match that we can be pretty confident. Brighton gave us a little bit of a scare last year at their place, but they're generally a side that likes to play football, and we usually do well against lower table sides that like to come out at us. They're kind of like a Bournemouth-ish type club, especially with the new manager Graham Potter. I think this is a game we can maybe put 2 or 3 in and rotate a little bit with the upcoming fixture pile up. We already know Fabinho is going to be suspended for this match, so there's already going to be a little bit of rotation in the midfield. I think maybe 1 or 2 more overall, whether it be in the midfield, whether it be in the defense, whether it be in the front line. we could do with some rotation and win pretty comfortably. This is not. I'll tell you what. This is not one of the games that I'm worried about coming up.
You always got to worry about Derby, though. We'll talk about that next pod. So, Jim, sorry, Boback, if I cut you off, but Jim,
oh no, you're fine.
Where are we sitting at on Brighton? How you feeling?
Same as Boback. Pretty confident. I mean, we're at home, so that's going to be a plus. I think the question is, as Boback already raised, what's the rotation going to be, particularly in midfield, given that Fabinho is going to be out of the match? What do you guys think? You think Milner will at least come in and play? I'm curious about your.
Milner,
I think, yeah.
Milner will play 100%. Whether that's for Fabinho and they move Henderson back, or they have Milner there, or if Robertson takes a day off and he goes and plays left back. That, or heck, even Joe Gomez could maybe play left back. That'd be something interesting to see. Boback, is Joel Matip getting close to being back full fitness?
I think Klopp said in the press conference that he's still quite a bit off.
Okay.
So I would expect maybe probably the end of December would probably be my guess for him. Because he's not even back in training or as far as I know, even running on his own or doing anything like that. It's kind of one of those inflammatory knee deals where there's really no timetable on it. It's just kind of whenever you feel like the pain's gone. Personally, in what you think what Klopp would do with the midfield, I think he's shown already the match that he decided to not risk Fabinho in with the Aston Villa away match, that I think he trusts Lallana in that position against sides like at Villa or Brighton, and I think that's probably who we're going to see when we're talking. And to be fair, that is the type of side you would be okay with seeing an Adam Lallana in the midfield three, and you don't necessarily need a destroyer in the midfield like a Fabinho at home against Brighton. So I think that's the way he'll go there. You asked about Milner. I think he for sure starts one of these two matches coming up, if not maybe both. Like Joe mentioned, maybe at left back is a possibility for Brighton. Maybe in the midfield here against Napoli, there might be a little bit of rotation. You never know. He does like to play Milner quite a bit in the Champions League, so you could see that as well.
Yeah. Where was I going? Oh well. Anyway, we'll see. We got a lot of things to think about. Oh yeah, Shaq's coming back from injury too. He's back training with the team full time. I'm definitely going to need him at some point in December, I think. Like hearing both sides say that this crap about there being a rift between the two is complete hogwash. So I like seeing that. I like everything being well with the club and well in the locker room. We will need Shaq at some point, whether he goes to Qatar or not, or he stays back and kind of is our main point for the Villa match, which we'll talk about in the future. But they're coming hard and fast, and it's going to be a crazy December. So buckle up for the ride. Yeah, I do want to point out something we didn't mention earlier is that this has been 30 straight EPL matches that Liverpool has been undefeated in. That is tied with was it Manchester City in their huge point haul total, right? Is that right? I'm trying to remember.
I think we've either drawn or surpassed our own club's unbeaten streak. I'm not sure we're anywhere close to
the record.
Premier League sides, because you're talking about
there was a graphic that was going out. The Arsenal Invincibles was only 40 matches.
That's 40.
Ten more.
They went at least a season.
They did.
So,
they did.
So I mean, we still have a little bit to go in that circumstance, but it's a tremendous feat and to think that a majority of those are wins.
Yeah.
If not all but maybe 3 or 4. I saw a graphic today that went back to our last. It went from after Chelsea in the 17-18 season through last match in Premier League only, and it had green. All the green were wins, yellow were draws, and red were losses, and it was a massive list of games. I wish I could count them all. I don't know if this is the 30-game streak. I'd imagine it's probably not. But there's one red blotch, the match against City, our one loss over this entire period. And then there's maybe 4 or 5 draws in there. It's all green, and it's tremendous. Wow. I think I read a stat that over the last 38 games, so when you consider a full season's worth of Premier League games, I think we're at like 103 or 106 points, something like that.
Wow.
I mean, it's unreal. And I think over the last 2 seasons worth of games so far, we've averaged 93 points, which would generally win you the Premier League in both those seasons. So, I mean, it's hard to really, really, really fully appreciate how good of a side it is that we're watching here when you have an equally as good side competing against them. I hope we're not taking this side for granted, because this is absolutely tremendous. That's 103 points over 38 games is
it's truly something special. It really is. It really is. All right. So that being said, we're going to go to plugs and non-plugs. I'm going to give Boback a little extra time to think tonight. Jim, plugs, non-plugs. You're up first.
Why you gotta do this to me, man?
Hey, you were second last time.
No, I think you had me go first, if I'm not mistaken, or am I wrong? I don't remember either. Here's what I was thinking about this day before I came on. I'm not going to do a non-plug this week because it's Thanksgiving week. I want to be positive. So I guess my plug is going to be to our listeners and to say thank you to them for downloading the podcast and coming along with us on this ride that you captain us on every week, Joe. And I'm thankful to you too for starting this and inviting me to participate. I really enjoy doing this, even though I don't feel like I'm necessarily the most informative person in the world half the time. But I enjoy sharing our love of Liverpool and talking about it. So thank you, and thank you to our listeners.
All right, Boback, plugs, non-plugs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with Jim in regards to tis the time to be thankful. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to be thankful for our home pub, because I don't think they get enough credit. I know certainly someone in particular doesn't give them a plug every single time he's on the podcast, but I want to give Union Jack Pub truly a great plug for this week, and let them know how thankful I am, how thankful we are overall that they're able to open early for us. They're always willing to accommodate us any single time we're there. They're willing to spend their hard-earned money for such a small business like them, to spend the kind of money they do to accommodate us, even if it's something that they may lose money on the long end, just to make sure that we feel welcome coming to their pub. I truly am thankful for that. And I guess, on a non-sentimental side, I don't really like to plug other podcasts on a podcast, but since we're on a Liverpool podcast, if you do happen to have any interest in listening to Jamie Carragher's new podcast, called The Greatest Game. Just came out the last month. Give a listen to. I've listened to 2 of his first 3 episodes here. One being the Thierry Henry podcast. He has one with Jordan Henderson as well. Kind of the format of the podcast is it's kind of just a casual conversation interview with a great of the game, and he asks them some pretty personal and definitely informative questions, and gets a lot out of them that you wouldn't necessarily get from a journalist. And I thought it was really interesting, those particular podcasts. So I think people that listen to this podcast might find an interest to it, being that they are probably Premier League fans as well as Liverpool fans. So no non-plugs today, just 2 plugs, one that I'm truly grateful for and one that I just thought was interesting.
Thank you, Boback. And I'm going to go on that whole roundabout of no non-plugs. I like that idea. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for that. So I want to plug... I want to piggyback on Boback's plug for Union Jack Pub. They also let us record podcasts there with famous authors. So thank you, Jay, Chelsea, for that. We really do appreciate everything that you guys do for us. You really do a great job of taking care of us, and being very accommodating. Also, what I want to plug is I want to plug John Green. So, look for him. Maybe put something out on Reddit. We found out that he's in some Liverpool Reddit. I don't know how Reddit works. I might need to figure that out at some point. But he's kind of lurking and stalking. But no, great interview. I had a blast talking with John. Brian did as well. If you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. If you have listened to it, download it and listen to it again. You get to hear about John's vasectomy, and how he got the second best urologist in Indianapolis. That was great. Okay, so anyway, that's going to do it this evening. We're going to thank you guys for listening.
One
go
more
ahead,
thing,
Jim.
Joe. I don't want to forget. We talked about this beforehand. And just a really quick shout out to our friends Mike and Gina, who are across the pond right now in London and are having a great time. Mike is a Fulham fan. They went to Craven Cottage today and got to see Fulham beat Derby County 3-0. They also, since they were in the area, did a tour of both the Emirates and Stamford Bridge. So Mike and Gina, hope you're having fun over there. It looks like you're having a blast.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. So yeah, thank you for all the listeners. Thanks for tuning in. I don't know if I ever really on air thanked John Green for the interview. We did, believe me. We really thanked him a lot after the pod recorded. But thank you, listeners, for tuning in, for listening, for downloading, for spreading the word, everything that you do to help grow this podcast. We truly appreciate it. Please remember to hit that subscribe button. That really makes a difference because it automatically loads as soon as we release a new episode. So thank you so much for that. And also, if you could please remember to hit that subscribe button. Our contact information is going to be in the pod notes, and that's, I think, what's going to be the new tradition. So this is Joe Dilling signing off for episode 99 of the Indie Reds podcast. You'll never walk alone.